US President Donald Trump could meet Russian President Vladimir Putin as soon as next week in an effort to broker an end to the war in Ukraine. The news came hours after Mr. Trump's special envoy Steve Witkoff met with President Putin in Moscow overnight. Mr. Trump says there's a good chance a meeting between himself, Mr. Putin and President Vladimir Zelensky of Ukraine could follow. Professor of Russian politics at King's College London, Sam Greene, says the meeting could be a way for both presidents to come to a solution.
Well, I think a little bit of caution and skepticism, maybe a lot of caution and skepticism would be certainly called for in this situation, right? Look, the fact is that Putin and Trump backed themselves into a corner to a certain extent with this ultimatum and deadline that Trump had given Putin by the end of the week. There was no way that Putin was going to let it look like he was caving in to pressure from the White House. But we'd also seen some skepticism from the White House about the possibility that the sanctions, might not themselves bring the kind of change in Russian behavior that Trump had said that they would be, that they wouldn't be as bone-crushing as the administration had described them as. And so he couldn't let himself get into a situation where, he looked ineffective as well. And so I think this looks like a sort of a compromise solution, a way out for the two of them to sit down, for Trump to be able to say that, that Putin is showing some goodwill, for Putin to project that he's willing to talk. But the question is, what's the solution that the two men can put on the table? Is it a solution that will be acceptable to the Ukrainians? Is it a solution that will be acceptable to the Europeans? And we really don't know that.
Now, we know that Donald Trump has been saying for a while now that he could end the war in Ukraine swiftly, even before he came to office. Now, is he realizing that the task might be harder than he first thought?
I'm guessing that he knew it was not terribly simple to begin with, and some of that was just a rhetorical flourish. But he did say back in the Hague NATO summit just about a month and a half ago, right? That I think in his words that nobody really knew how complicated this would be. I'm not quite sure that's the case, but clearly, he has shown some frustration with his inability to get this done, and with the state of his relationship with Putin, which I think he had been counting on to get some kind of a deal on the table and eventually across the line.
Now, President Trump has put in successive deadlines for Russia to agree to a truce. The next one is tomorrow. What has he threatened should that deadline not be met, and is enough pressure being put on Putin, do you think?
Well, he's threatened a couple of things. The biggest thing that he's threatened is sanctions, and that centers primarily around a bill that is currently on the floor of the U.S. Senate. This is a bill that would impose some additional sanctions, personal sanctions on shadow fleet ships and other sort of assets that Russia uses to circumvent the existing sanctions. It would also impose additional tariffs on countries that are importing Russian oil and other hydrocarbons. We've already seen Trump move in that direction in his tariffs imposed recently on India, and he's threatened to do that more broadly. That may have some effect, but economists and financial experts are quite skeptical about the degree to which that will turn out to be feasible, certainly at the 100% tariff level that he has talked about. The other thing that he's talked about is increasing weapons deliveries to Ukraine. To a certain extent, he's already done that by making it easier for NATO allies and other European states to buy U.S. manufactured arms and send those to Ukraine. But there is significant capacity for the U.S. itself to send arms to Ukraine if it so decides.
Now, the relationship between Trump and Putin has been fracturing. You mentioned yourself, Trump was probably trying to work that relationship in his favor. Now, could they still reconcile if the ceasefire deadline isn't met? And will Trump give up any hope of bringing the end to a war?
Well, the big question really, and we don't know the answer to this because we can't get inside Trump's head, is how personal has Trump been taking his frustration with Putin. We have now seen, I'd say, more than a month of consistent messaging from the White House, from Trump directly, about his level of frustration with Putin, that he feels that maybe he's being taken for a ride, or that Putin isn't taking this seriously, or that Putin is lying to him. That is, in and of itself, striking. This is one of Trump's longest standing and really strongest political relationships, really since he came to office in his first term. He sees Putin as somebody who went through the trenches with him on the Trump-Russia accusations, and as somebody who shares a lot of his political instincts and affinities. And so it would be striking, right, if Trump were to allow this relationship to break down, were to take this personally. But it's not beyond the realm of possibility that that's where things are heading. I think, while Putin does not want to be seen to be kowtowing to Trump and doing things simply because Trump asked him to, he also sees this relationship as a political asset for him. I don't think he sees it as an intimate a friendship as Trump does. But for Putin, it does give him leverage, particularly in the confrontation with Europe, which is really critical to Russia's current geopolitical stance, right? And he's not willing and not certainly eager to see Trump walk away from the table in a huff.
President Trump said there's good chance a meeting between himself, President Putin, and President Vladimir Zelensky of Ukraine could follow. How likely is this to happen?
Well, so what we've heard now from the White House and the Kremlin is that Trump and Putin will meet in the coming days, probably early next week. We have obviously heard from the White House that they would move on after that to a three-way meeting, including President Zelensky. Zelensky himself has said that it now looks like the Russian side may be leaning towards some kind of a ceasefire. And it's, again, also incredibly important for Zelensky to keep Trump at the table and to project goodwill and willingness to participate in whatever peace process Trump thinks he is creating here. And so it will be very difficult for Zelensky not to show up at that table. The question, though, is what happens at that table and what are the contours of a deal? Ukraine cannot accept a deal that does not provide for security after some kind of a ceasefire, that does not provide some real deterrence against renewed Russian aggression. And that means allowing its allies, particularly the Europeans, to continue to support Ukraine's defense capacity. And that, on the other hand, is something that Russia very much does not want to see. So these will be very complicated and very difficult negotiations. And it would be surprising, although not entirely beyond the realm of possibility, again, that they do lead to something real.
And lastly, Professor Sam, how is Ukraine feeling about this? Does it hold any hope of a peaceful outcome in its favour?
I mean, look, hope is probably a little bit too much to ask for from Ukraine at the moment. Ukraine is tired, right? Ukraine is exhausted to a certain extent. Ukrainians themselves, who are spending night after night in bomb shelters, are exhausted, but they also have a lot of resolve. They understand what the consequences of a bad deal would look like. And they are, I think, unwilling to accept a deal that would simply mean that Russia has the opportunity to take a breather, to rearm itself with support from China, from North Korea, from Iran, from Russia's own allies, and to come back for another bite at the apple later, particularly in a situation in which Europe may feel impeded from helping Ukraine build up its own defenses. It does not want to accept a deal now that would simply mean it would be more vulnerable later.
Professor Sam Greene, thank you very much for your time.
Thank you.